What's up, everyone? In today's video, we're going over Sythis Enchantress EDH. By the way, just before we start, if you like this video, make sure you press the like button. Let me know what you think about this commander in the comments below. Consider subscribing to the channel. Sythis Harvest Hand is a green and a white for a 1/2 enchantment nymph. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So what are the strengths of this commander? It's cheap to cast. Whenever your commander is 2 CMC, you're going to get it out quicker than your opponents. And also, the tax from going into command zone is not going to hurt you as much because casting this for 4 mana, it's not that bad. You get to draw off of enchantments entering. So your whole deck is going to be enchantments and you'll draw off of those. And you'll gain life too, which incidental life gain matters with some of the synergies we have in our deck with certain other cards. Sythis will draw off of other enchantresses, so Sythis being an enchantment creature will trigger any of our enchantment synergies. So if you have another enchantress in play, and then we play Sythis, we'll draw off of Sythis. And Sythis will count towards anything that cares about enchantments in our deck. This deck tech is based on a high-powered casual meta. It's not based off of CEDH, just letting you know. So first we're going to go over the win cons. So the first category of win cons is going to be making tokens from enchantments entering that will attack and win the game. So Sigil of the Empty Throne, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you make a 4/4. It's a pretty big body. Ajani's Chosen, whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control. So if you flicker an enchantment, this triggers it, while a Sigil of the Empty Throne only triggers when you cast an enchantment. So Ajani's Chosen makes a 2/2 white cat whenever you play an enchantment. So if you have multiple ones of these out, you can make a 4/4 and a 2/2 whenever you play an enchantment, which is pretty strong. Hallowed Haunting is probably the best one. So it gives your creatures flying and vigilance if you have 7 or more enchantments. So you're likely to have that, and then the creatures you're going to have get flying and vigilance, which makes them into evasive threats. But whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you make a white spirit with this creature's power and toughness equal number of spirits you control. So when you have this out, the first enchantment you play is going to be a 1/1. The second one you have 2 2/2s. The third one you have 3 3/3s. And it's just going to grow exponentially over time until you have 7 7/7s or whatever. So Hallowed Haunting is a really powerful card. It's 4 mana. So you play this on turn 4 or turn 3, whatever. And then afterwards you play enchantments, make your spirits, and then they're going to grow as the game goes along because you're going to be playing more and more enchantments. So this is a first strategy, making tokens to win the game. Second strategy is just different cards that do different things. Starfield Nyx turns your enchantments into big creatures. As long as you control 5 or more enchantments, each other non-aura enchantment is a creature in addition to its other types. Has base power and toughness equal to mana value. So something like a Hallowed Haunting will be 4 mana 4/4. Sigil of the Empty Throne will be a 5 mana 5/5. So all of those little enchantments that you play, or all the bigger enchantments you play, will be creatures. Which is pretty sweet. Catilda itself is a big threat because it has power and toughness each equal number of permanents you control, their spirits and or enchantments. So what's really cool about this is that it's going to have the power and toughness each equal to the number of enchantments you control, but it's a spirit and counts for spirit, so it synergizes with Hallowed Haunting. And then last we have Destiny Spinner, which is probably one of the best win cons in the deck. So it gives our creature an enchantment spells you control can't be countered. So that means that your opponent's counter spells will not work against our enchantments, so they're not going to be countered. Very good against blue decks. And then late in the game, you can pay 4 mana to give a land you control turn into an XX elemental creature with trample and haste. So it's going to be able to attack, and it's going to be able to get over small creatures. And its power and toughness each equal to the number of enchantments you control. So late in the game, you have 6 or 7 enchantments out. You pay 4 mana, turn your land into a 7/7. You have a 7/7 threat out of nowhere. You can do this multiple times. This deck generates lots of mana, so you can do that, make tons of lands, and then kill your opponents. So these are some examples of win cons we have in our deck. We have these token makers, and we have these various win cons. But your deck is going to have a little trouble winning the game sometimes. When I was playing this a round of just these win cons, I was having trouble winning the game. And I decided to put some combos in the deck just to close out the game. So Seed Cradle Witch and Sanctum Weaver is an infinite mana combo that creates an infinitely large Sanctum Weaver. So if you have more than 4 enchantments, Sanctum Weaver plus Seed Cradle Witch goes infinite. Now you have to do this in a special way. So Sanctum Weaver, if you have, let's say, 6 enchantments, you tap this for 6 green. You activate this ability, you have to put a white into it. Untap this, tap 6 white, and then use some of the green you created to untap it again. And then doing this, you'll make infinite mana, but you have to alternate green and white in order to untap this and make infinite mana. And this makes infinite mana infinitely large Sanctum Weaver, which you can just hit a defenseless opponent with. Or you can just, make infinite mana and do all sorts of crazy things. We have some payoffs for infinite mana. You're going to see one on the next slide. And this is a really good way to get extra mana as well. So yeah, Seed Cradle Witch with Sanctum Weaver, infinite mana, plus an infinitely large Sanctum Weaver. Pretty sweet. Next, we have Heliod and Walking Ballista combo. So this is another payoff for infinite mana. We have Sanctum Weaver, which can make tons of mana. If it makes infinite mana, we just put it all into Walking Ballista and kill our opponent. Pretty sweet. But if we have Heliod and Walking Ballista off, this is a 2-card combo. And both of these synergize with our deck. Walking Ballista, we make tons of mana with Sanctum Weaver, so that synergizes with that. Heliod works well with Sythis' life gain trigger. So if you have Sythis out, then we play Heliod. Not only will we draw a card, but we'll gain a life, which allows us to put a counter on our Sythis or our Heliod to grow our team and make it more buff. But of course, you have both of these out. We get infinite combo. You don't know how it works. You have Heliod out. You play Walking Ballista X2. You deal a damage. Then you give Walking Ballista lifelink. It'll deal the damage, and then Heliod will trigger, lifelink will trigger, gaining you a life, and then Heliod will trigger, allowing you to put the counter back on the Walking Ballista to ping your opponent again, gaining you 1 life, putting a counter back, and then that cycles. Repeat until your opponents are dead. Really easy combo, and both sides synergize well with our deck. Next, we're going to talk about the Enchantresses. So Sythis is not only enchantment, Enchantress in our deck, we have other Enchantresses that allow us to draw cards, and drawing cards will allow us to find our combo and our win cons. So Eidolon of Blossoms is an enchantment, so it'll trigger off of other Enchantresses. Same with Enchantress's Presence, but Eidolon of Blossoms, when it comes into play, you draw a card. So it'll come into play, draw a card, and then draw a card off of your Sythis. Enchantress's Present, whenever you cast a enchantment spell, draw a card. So whenever you cast enchantment spell, draw a card. It does not count itself, but it is 3 mana, and you can play this and play your Sythis to draw a card. Our Golfian Enchantress is not an enchantment, so will not draw off of your other Enchantresses or Sythis, but it has Shroud, and it's 2 mana, so it's going to be really good. So each of these has their own strengths and weaknesses. Another good one is Satyr Enchanter, however, that is not an enchantment, and it's also 3 mana Selesnya, so that one's probably the weakest one, but these are pretty strong in the deck because they will allow your Sythis to come in and draw you cards, but also will draw you cards off of your Sythis. So that's going to be pretty powerful. So we draw cards in this deck from our enchantments. How are we going to use the mana? So we need ramp to be able to use the cards that we draw. So all these are enchantments, which means they'll trigger draw off of our Enchantresses, which is sweet. And they act as ramp in some way. Wild Growth is probably the best card in this deck, along with Utopia Sprawl. There's Wild Growth, Utopia Sprawl, and Fertile Ground in this deck are enchantments that come in, enchant to lands, and allow those lands to tap for additional mana. So this ramps you, but it also triggers off of your Sythis and other Enchantresses to draw cards. So that's going to be pretty powerful. And they're only 1 mana, and they do a lot. Sanctum Weaver comes in and adds X mana of any one color, X number of enchantments you control. You have 3 or 4 enchantments. This will tap for 3 or 4 mana. It at least always taps for 1 mana. And if you have an Enchantress out, this comes in and replaces itself right away. And then we have cards like Jukai Naturalist, where it says enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So if you have this out, your Sanctum Weaver is going to only cost 1 green, which is insane. Your Eidolon of Blossom is going to only cost 3. Enchantress's Presence is only going to cost 2. So having these cost reducers out will really benefit you. We also have Cloud Key in this deck to reduce the cost of our enchantments. It is not an enchantment, so it doesn't trigger off of our Enchantment Matters cards, but it's still a really powerful card. So all these are ways to ramp that are enchantments that will draw us cards. So I like these a lot. Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl are insane. But remember, with these cards, Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl, you can play them on turn 1. However, you shouldn't. You should always play them when you have Sythis in play so that you can draw a card off of your ramp. Yeah, don't play Sanctum Weaver before your Enchantress. Play your Sythis and then play Sanctum Weaver. Even though it'll lose you a little mana in the short run, it'll gain you cards. Next, we're going to talk about probably the best ramp spell in our deck, Serra's Sanctum. So this is Sanctum Weaver on a land. So it has the same effect as Sanctum Weaver, except it only taps for white for each enchantment you control. Now, Serra's Sanctum doesn't automatically tap for mana like Sanctum Weaver, so this could potentially tap for 0 mana. So that is a downside. However, it can potentially tap for 8 or 9 mana, just like Sanctum Weaver. We have another card in this deck that works well. It is a 1-mana enchantment, which is great in this deck because it'll draw us cards. Nature's Chosen. This allows us to play untap enchanted creature, so we can play this on our Sanctum Weaver to untap it to add double mana. We can also use this to tap enchanted creature to untap target artifact, creature, or land. So we could put it on our Sythis to untap our Sanctum Weaver, or put it on our Sythis to untap something like a Serra's Sanctum so we can double up our mana. We can also use this to just untap a normal land and basically just use this as a ramp spell too. Nature's Chosen is a card that sees play in the CEDH Sythis decks that I decided to put in the casual EDH decks because of how good it is with Serra's Sanctum and Sanctum Weaver. And it's just a 1-mana ramp spell at worst, and at best it's going to allow us to go from 4 mana to 8 mana. It's going to allow us to double up our mana, which is insane. Nature's Chosen is a little bit of an older card, but it's a reasonable price, and you can find it for around $4. So it's not that big of a deal, but it's a really strong card. Next, we're going to talk about tutors. So these will allow us to find our cards like Nature's Chosen, allow us to find our ramp, our enchantresses, allow us to find our combo pieces as well. Enlightened Tutor, 1 mana, you just search for any artifact or enchantment, put it on top, very strong. Moonblessed Cleric is 3 mana, so it's a lot more expensive, but if you're able to flicker it, then you can get multiple activations out of it. But my favorite one is Sterling Grove. This card's insane. For green and a white, it gives other enchantments Shroud. So this will be able to protect our enchantments from removal. But if we don't need that, we can pay 1, sacrifice it, search your library for enchantment, and put it on top. So while it's in play, it gives our other enchantment Shroud, but it can also be used as a tutor. This card is probably one of the best cards in our deck. I absolutely love it, and it's a good way of tutoring out whatever we need. So one of the strategies is the Pillowfort strategy. We play a lot of enchantments, and there's one powerful enchantment we want to turn on. So the reason we play these Pillowfort / Stax cards is because we want to allow ourselves to have time before we combo off, allow us to have time so we can build our board, or also trigger our Luminarch Ascension. So these Stax pieces will allow us to play Luminarch Ascension. So Luminarch Ascension, at the beginning of each opponent's instep, you didn't lose life this turn, you may put a quest counter. So when you play this, people are going to automatically want to attack you, so you got to keep them from attacking you. So you can put quest counters, and then once you have 4 quest counters on it, you can pay 2 mana and make a 4/4. Flying. So it's a pretty powerful card. And of course, this being an enchantment, triggers our enchantresses, draws us cards, and then it'll come in, and if it survives, and if we can put quest counters on it, we'll be able to make 4/4s and easily win the game. So we need to protect ourselves so that we can activate Luminarch Ascension. Blind Obedience, artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So it slows down our opponent, slows down cards like Dockside Extortionist, slows down any sort of artifact ramp my opponents have, slow down my opponent's aggro plan. Very powerful card. Sphere of Safety, creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays X. For each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. We also play Ghostly Prison in this deck. So Ghostly Prison, Sphere of Safety will prevent our opponents from attacking us unless they want to pay lots of mana. And Sphere of Safety is even more powerful because if we have 5 enchantments out, they have to play 5 for each attacker they want to attack. That's going to protect us. And then Solitary Confinement is the ultimate protection spell. Now, at first glance, this seems bad because you skip your draw step and you have to discard a card every turn. However, if you continue to draw enchantresses, you have enchantress on the field, you play this, you draw a card, you continue to draw enchantments, and you continue to draw cards. It'll give you Shroud and prevent all damage that will be dealt to you, which will allow you to take over the game. Our enchantments, they'll trigger your enchantresses, any of your enchantment synergies, but also protect you so you can turn your Luminarch Ascension online or give yourself time to find your win con or find your combo. We also have Authority of the Councils in the deck. It's a 1 mana. It's a 1 mana enchantment that'll draw us a card, but also keep our opponent's things tapped and gain us life. Very good card. Deafening Silence is another good Stax option. That'll slow down our opponents because it'll allow them to only cast 1 non-creature spell a turn. Pretty powerful cards. Now we're going to talk about the problem with Enchantress, and that is that everyone plays enchantment hate that's efficient. And there's ways that people can sweep your enchantments up. So here's some examples of cards that kill enchantments. Nature's Claim destroys an artifact or enchantment for 1 mana. You have the new card Get Lost, which does the same thing. You have Austere Command, which destroys all enchantments as an added mode on it. And then you have cards like Reverent Silence and Back to Nature, which destroy all enchantments. This is a pretty big problem. Might not be a problem the first time you play this deck, but if you routinely play this deck, people are going to play more of these cards to just ruin your day. So we need a way to recur our enchantments and protect our enchantments. So we have Sterling Grove, and we also have Greater Oromancy, which both give our enchantment Shroud. Very powerful cards. And then we have replenish effects that recur enchantments. So if our opponent sweeps our enchantments with Austere Command or Back to Nature, we can replenish and then bring them back to play. Or you can play something like Brilliant Restoration to bring them back to play. These cards are very good because they can return all the enchantments from a graveyard to play in a sweep in case their opponent sweeps our board. And we can use cards like Sterling Grove and Greater Oromancy to protect our enchantments from spot removal. I do like the idea of cards that give our enchantments indestructible. There's not many of those, and something like Replenish could be insanely powerful because we could also fill our graveyard with enchantments. We can move to discard, and if we have lots of cards in our hand, we can discard them to hand size, and then use something like Replenish to just get them into play for free. That's another side thing of these Brilliant Restoration Replenish cards, is if we have self-mill, or if we just draw too many cards and we can't play them all, we can discard them and then play something like Brilliant Restoration or Replenish to bring them back. Another strategy. Another wrinkle of those cards. But yeah, Protection, Recursion is necessary for this deck because people play a lot of removal and a lot of sweepers, specifically for enchantments. And the more you play this deck, the more they're going to play that. So you need stuff like this. Anyways, we went over just the general deck tech of the Sythis. If you want to see more of the cards that this deck plays, check out the deck list below. We talked about the strengths of this deck, the win cons, the combos this deck plays, the different enchantresses, the different ramp. We talked about Sarah's Sanctum. We talked about the deck's tutors, the Pillowfort strategy, the problem that we have as an Enchantress player, and ways that we can protect and recur our stuff. Anyways, I hope you liked this video. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.